Matt Mayoko says Brandon Aiyuk could be traded. What? I'm going to break that down and more coming up next. What is up, everybody? It's the Vish Kumaran show. I'm Vish Kumaran, and there's some breaking news in 49ers land. After a long negotiation this entire summer, Matt Mayoko is now saying that he thinks that trading Brandon Aiyuk is a legitimate option for the San Francisco 49ers. I usually don't sound the alarm bells when I hear stuff like this. Oftentimes people wrongly predict stuff like this when it comes to the 49ers, but if Matt Mayoko is saying it's possible, it's definitely possible. In this video, I'm going to break down why I think a trade at this point for both Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers is a lose-lose. I'm going to get into some specifics on why I think the 49ers need Brandon Aiyuk and why Brandon Aiyuk needs the 49ers. So let's get into it. First and foremost, obviously, there's timing issues on why this deal between Brandon Ayuk and any other team and the 49ers trading him is a bad option at this point. It's because, one, the 49ers are at a desperate timeline a little bit. They're coming to the end of the cheapest, biggest bargain contract in NFL history. They have a starting quarterback at the salary of Mr. Irrelevant, which is unheard of. And they have that for essentially 2 more years, and they have to maximize this Super Bowl window with an aging core that's already had an unprecedented amount of success for a team that hasn't won a Super Bowl. And so, given all of those variables, they need Brandon Ayuk in this upcoming season, and they don't improve immediately by trading Brandon Ayuk at this point in the season, as the draft capital that they may recoup will not be utilized until next year. So that's why, just from a timetable standpoint, this deal doesn't make sense. Now, I'm going to get into some of the football reasons why I think Brandon Ayuk needs the 49ers and why I think the 49ers need Brandon Ayuk. I'm going to start off with why I think Brandon Ayuk or why I think the 49ers need Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Aiyuk, let's start off with one thing. I think he's one of the 10 best receivers in the sport. He is a true number one wide receiver. He's a true X receiver in the NFL, which means he's going to line up on the ball. He's going to line up as the single receiver X, backside of 3-by-1 formations, and he's going to be able to win against man coverage against the best corners in the NFL. That's been his role for the last couple years. I don't think the 49ers have adequately replaced that guy. I think they need a guy who does that. I think Brandon Ayuk is that type of guy. I think he profiles as one of the 10 best receivers in the sport, and I think he's an ascending player. He's growing. Now, why I think, for example, them drafting Ricky Pearsall doesn't replace that. Well, if I look at Ricky Pearsall, and I'm not going to get into the training camp reports of how Ricky Pearsall is or isn't looking. Oftentimes, I think training camp reports have turned into somewhat of a pissing contest between reporters. So I don't know that we're getting the most reliable information. I don't know if Pearsall is playing great. I don't know if Pearsall is playing bad. I feel like there has been some conflicting reporting on that. I will be able to watch Ricky Pearsall myself. But getting into the player that I liked coming out of college and why I think he doesn't replace Brandon Ayuk is I look at Pearsall as a complementary player to Brandon Ayuk. I don't look at Pearsall as, hey, this is a number one receiver in the NFL that you line up as your X receiver on top of the ball. And, in the Super Bowl, L'Jarius Sneed is going to get 50 snaps in man-to-man coverage against this guy, and they're going to really go at it. And Ricky Pearsall is going to be able to win contested reps against a corner like that. For example, I think Ricky Pearsall has been compared a lot to Cooper Kupp. I think that's because they're both white for no other reason. Maybe they have some similar skill sets, but I don't know that there's that much of a comparison there. To me, he's more, if we're going Rams receivers, he's more Robert Woods. He's a guy that moves around. He goes in motion. He's a terrific blocker. He's tough as nails. He's a terrific route runner. He catches contested passes. He is, to me, the perfect flanker supporting a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who's a true X receiver. So for me, from a skill set standpoint, it's not that I don't look at Pearsall as a very good player. I do. I don't know if he's doing that well in training camp right now, but this was a player I liked a lot coming out of college. but I liked him as a complement to a true number one X receiver like Brandon Aiyuk. And so to me, Pearsall's skill set, and when I look at Pearsall, I don't look at him as a replacement. I look at him as a guy that's complementary to Brandon Aiyuk. I don't think he does what Brandon Aiyuk does. In fact, I think he does more of what Deebo Samuel does, but he does it in a very different way, right? Like I brought up the Robert Woods example. Robert Woods is not Deebo Samuel. He's not used like Deebo Samuel, but he was in that offense providing a role going in motion, doing some of the run game stuff, cracking, doing all these kinds of different things in the run game. That's the role I imagine Ricky Pearsall playing in more of a progressive passing version of the Shanahan offense. He can fit the Deebo Samuel role without exactly emulating that skill set. Now let's get to Deebo Samuel himself, who's in alleged outstanding shape coming into this training camp. Why I think Deebo Samuel doesn't replace Brandon Aiyuk as this true X receiver, and why I think the 49ers need Deebo Samuel. Well, Deebo Samuel these days just struggles to separate from man coverage. And this is something I've pushed back on a lot. I don't think that the consensus opinion on Deebo's route running is actually correct. I think Deebo tends to get the short end of the straw when people talk about him as a receiver. Even today, I think it's not as bad as people describe. I think he's a better wide receiver outside and a better route runner than he is given credit for on a general basis. And I don't just say that because he's my favorite player. But even within that, I've also grown my opinion in terms of how I see Deebo and his skill set within this offense. Now, I understand he's in outstanding shape, but to me, we're at a point with Deebo that regardless of the shape he is in his career, he just doesn't move the same as the 2021 guy. And I think there's specific differences in how he's been running routes the last couple years versus early in his career. When you looked at Deebo as a route runner early in his career, he not only had this strength and explosion when the ball was in the air to be the first guy to the ball and just continue running and maintain that speed after the catch, but he also had a little bit of wiggle at the top of his route. Now, he could be a little inefficient when he ran his routes where he takes a couple of steps too many, but he had a great in and out explosion that would make guys struggle. I mean, you go back and watch Rocky Sin trying to press him in the Senior Bowl. He had a couple of absolute days against Rocky Sin back in the day in 2019 at the Senior Bowl in red zone one-on-ones. You go look at what he did to Shaq Griffin, a guy who's really long and struggles to transition, especially early in his career when like 2019 rookie Deebo Samuel, there was more shake to his route running. There was a better ability to come in and out of his breaks and explode. He doesn't have that anymore. And he, apropos to how he runs with the ball in his hands, he has the nickname Deebo. And to me, he tends to run routes on the outside like he's Deebo, but he's not Deebo on the outside. He's not A.J. Brown, where he physically overwhelms corners on the outside. I mean, you go back and watch Trent McDuffie trying to guard him in the Super Bowl, and I would say one of the things that stood out is McDuffie wasn't really scared of Deebo's physicality. It's not that Deebo is getting out physical, but he's also not winning on the outside by being physically overwhelming. And I think that that's the difference, honestly, in why he's struggling to separate versus man coverage, especially now versus earlier in his career. Now, I think part of it is also the Deebo usage. People kind of know how he's going to line up, what routes he's going to run from where he lines up. And I don't know if that's a Shanahan thing or if that's a Deebo thing, but that skill set has not evolved over the course of his career. But specific to his route running and why the 49ers need Brandon Aiyuk and why Deebo Samuel, to me, doesn't profile as that X receiver that the 49ers need, it's because he runs routes like he's trying to use his strength and his physicality to overwhelm corners. And it's not that he isn't a strong player, because it's not like he's getting rerouted by these guys. But people like McDuffie, these bigger physical corners, I'm sure Mooney Ward gives him issues in practice because of his size and length. And Deebo is not a big framed guy to begin with to win with physicality, right? Like Deebo is big, he's thick, he's put together, but like Brandon Aiyuk is a huge 6', 200-pound guy, right? Long arms, huge frame, much bigger guy than even Ricky Pearsall, who has similar height, weight, frame ratios to him. When you look at Brandon Aiyuk's long arms, you look at his torso, you look at how he's built much bigger than his frame. Deebo Samuel has some short arms and all of that. So to me, he doesn't profile winning the way he's trying to win on the outside. And so that's why, to me, this skill set doesn't fit Deebo Samuel either. So to me, that's why the 49ers need Brandon Aiyuk. He's a very unique player in this offense. I don't think they can replace him. Obviously, he's young. He's ascending. We know his statistics. I know everybody knows the yards per route run, stuff like that. He's got overwhelmingly efficient and good statistics. But from a pure skill set standpoint, what he does and what he does in this offense is completely irreplaceable at this point, because the other two guys that are there to quote unquote replace it, to me, complement him much better than they do replacing him. Now, before I get into why I think the 49ers, or why I think Brandon Aiyuk needs the 49ers, because I think there's a few schematic reasons behind that as well, I'm going to have to offer up some uh discussion from some friends of the show that have joined us this year. So, guys, this year, BetUS is partnering with me in providing some action on the sports. Guys, BetUS offers the fastest payouts in the industry, 125% sign up bonus, up to $2,000 and 200% crypto deposit bonus. You get a fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process. Guys, check out the link in the description with my BetUS link. You get 24/7 personalized service for 365 days, live major wagering on all major games. The football season is coming up, guys. And if you want help, if you want to go to the best place to play sports bets, BetUS is here for you. Over the course of the year, I'm going to show you guys some of maybe my favorite bets for the week. But let's get back into the show, and let's get back into why I think the Niners, or why I think Brandon Aiyuk needs the 49ers. Let's start off with Brandon Aiyuk's skill set alone, right? I just was very effusive in my praise of why I think Brandon Aiyuk is a number one wide receiver. I think he's a guy that wins on the outside, wins versus one-on-one coverage. But I think he's a different kind of quote unquote number one receiver. And I'm going to give a couple examples on the way I think he profiles and why I think he needs the 49ers, right? Ayuk wins because of his extreme intelligence, exceptional body control, and ability to change direction at the top of the route with while making all of his breaks look the same. And then three, he's a pretty big frame guy at the catch point. And I don't think this gets enough credit, but he catches the ball away from his frame. It's very subtle, but he catches the ball away from his frame. And he's got a big frame, right? Long torso, long arms, long legs. Like, this is a big 6 foot, 200-pound guy. And he uses those things to his advantage. What the 49ers offense offers for Brandon Aiyuk is, for a player that relies maybe on his skills rather than his overwhelming physical ability to win on the outside. Like, you contrast how Aiyuk wins versus an AJ Brown or a Devonta Smith. In a very vertical offense, they're asked to run by these elite corners, 10, 15 times a game. Very difficult thing to do. Maybe not what's suited for Aiyuk's skill set. He plays in an offense that gives him condensed splits. The spacing is ideal on certain routes. The way they have him run certain routes into certain leverage, it's ideal. So he plays in an offense that really highlights the skill of a route runner. And that's where I think Aiyuk needs the 49ers. Look at a guy like Davante Adams, right? Terrific player, one of the greats, future Hall of Famer. I don't know that Brandon Aiyuk is the next Davante Adams, but Davante Adams similarly is a number one receiver who wins on his skills rather than what his God-given physical ability is. We saw last year in a mess of a situation with the Raiders, right? Davante Adams needs the benefit of a good offense that creates space, that, has good timing, a quarterback that can throw, that can play, that can read up through a progression and get the ball on time and on schedule to Davante Adams. Now, Adams is always going to get open, but there has to be a cadence and rhythm to the offense in order for a guy like him to succeed. You contrast that to Jamar Chase last year with Jake Browning, or DeAndre Hopkins going way back when he was playing with TJ Yates, those kinds of guys. Guys that can take a 5-yard slant and go 80. Guys that you can throw back shoulder to them and they're just going to come down with it because they're physically overwhelming. Well, those guys succeed regardless of if you put them in a crap offense or if you put them in those types of situations. So when I look at Brandon Aiyuk, I think when you look at his skill set as a number one wide receiver, if he's on the San Francisco 49ers with Brock Purdy as his quarterback, I look at him as a 90 catch, 1,200 yard, 12 touchdown receiver for the next 5, 6, 7 years. He can be that kind of guy. Now, if you put him in a place like Washington, for example, Jaden Daniels, look at what he did, right? In LSU, for example, a lot of slot fades, a lot of vertical routes, very Philadelphia Eagles-esque. Brian Thomas, very vertical receiver. Malik Neighbors can do it all, but he's Brandon Aiyuk if Brandon Aiyuk ran a 4.3. And so I don't know that I look at Jaden Daniels, and I don't know what Jaden Daniels is going to be like in the NFL, but looking at his college skill set, I don't know that Brandon Aiyuk is going to go kill it in Washington. New England, similar kind of thing. I know the Cleveland thing is the other one that's thrown out there as a fit. To me, Brandon Aiyuk, obviously extremely talented player who would succeed anywhere, but he succeeds that much more on the San Francisco 49ers than he does on other football teams. When you look at his route running, when you look at the splits, the spacing that he's offered, the spacing of the routes, the way Brandon Aiyuk is asked to run routes into certain leverage and stuff like that, those are the minor details that enhance the opportunities and enhance the reputation of a player like Brandon Aiyuk. Now, I don't know if the 49ers look at that and they say, well, okay, we don't want to pay him that much because he does need our help a little bit to be a number one receiver. Well, if that's the case, then I kind of understand that, but I don't really understand that when I look at who their quarterback is, right? Like guys like Brandon Aiyuk, guys who win on route running, they need a quarterback who plays with anticipation. They need a quarterback who they have that ingrained timing with, because when Brandon Aiyuk comes out of his break and he's always going to create separation at the top of his routes, that's what makes him special. The ball better freaking be there. And that's what makes a guy like Brock Purdy so great with a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, because the timing is that exact. It's that precise. To me, this is the duo going forward on the San Francisco 49ers offensively they should invest in. I don't want to be, I guess, negative, but I'm not too positive on the prospects of a CMC moving forward, given the age, attrition, 3 different seasons in his career already of 300 plus touches. He's already nearing a time where running backs' careers come to an end. I don't love that spot in terms of long-term investment. Debo, similar kind of thing. To me, he's already starting to dissipate. George Kittle's body has been breaking down. Trent Williams obviously has been unavailable, and he's a guy that year after year you have to wonder about his retirement. To me, Ayuk and Purdy are the 2 guys on the 49ers offense that I look at as shoo-ins long term. Obviously, it's a little bit concerning that the 49ers and Ayuk seem to have such differing opinions on the value. I've always pointed out how I think the 49ers have a differing opinion of Brandon Ayuk's talent versus the consensus and versus how the fans viewed. I think the fans view Brandon Ayuk as a cinch number one receiver who deserves to be paid the dollar that Amon-Ra St. Brown and those kinds of guys were paid. It doesn't seem the 49ers look at it that way. I've always found that interesting. Obviously, I think this is ultimately a lose-lose situation for both. There's a very detailed reasons that I've outlined in this video, in my opinion, that go over why I think the 49ers need Ayuk, as well as why I think Ayuk needs the 49ers. I think because of this, ultimately the deal does get done. I think Ayuk wants to be a 49er, and I think the 49ers are basically relying on the fact that Brandon Aiyuk is desperate, and they understand that they have pushed him into a corner that he can't necessarily come out of. And I think that they're hoping that by pushing him into that corner, they now have gotten the opportunity to sign him. And as Harvey Dent once said, the night's darkest right before dawn. I think this is the darkest time of Brandon Ayuk's contract negotiation. I think a deal will get done next week. I don't think it behooves either party at this point to move on. Both parties are very desperate in terms of their urgency to win this year. And I think Brandon Aiyuk, for a player whose last 2 football seasons have gone excellent, thanks to a lot of preparation and focus on a lot of details within this offense, I don't think that he wants to miss out on any more of that. I think he wants to come back. And therefore, I think a deal will get done this week. That's my prediction, guys. Ultimately, this is a lose-lose situation if the deal doesn't get done. That's my take on the Brandon Aiyuk situation so far. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe while you're here. There's a lot more 49ers content coming from me this year. I will have a video shortly also explaining what the prospects is on this channel for the upcoming years, some of the things that I plan to do, and some of the ways the content from this channel, the content from me, is going to be different and hopefully better from years in the past. Thank you again for watching. See you next time.